Okay, hi everyone. I am here with Adrienne Dillard, who I'm sure a lot of you know. So we're going to talk about her books a little bit and some of the things that we did on her last visit, because the main reason that we were going to do this today is because she was supposed to be coming over in July, weren't you? And
Yes.
it's all gone horribly wrong. So, um, yeah, she's a little bit sad. I know lots of you have had things planned and they've got cancelled. So it's a little bit sad, really. So we've just got some questions and some bits and pieces. But first of all, this is a strange one because I've known you for such a long time now, and we've done so much stuff that you think interviews are like a formality almost. And
They do feel very formal for us.
yeah, but we've seen each other like in Disney World and in Hampton Court, but then in our pajamas and like just
Yeah.
like in the mornings going, oh no, we're tired. So, and I've interviewed you on the Tudor Society, and you've interviewed me before as well. So it's all a bit of a strange, slightly artificial setup. So, but tell us a little bit about you and about your books.
Um, well, I guess the basics. I live in Oregon. I am the mom to a little boy who's 10. And, I'm sure if you follow me on social media, you've seen very interesting videos of him dancing and his political commentary on, why Queen Elizabeth is such an amazing queen, which I'm very proud that
He's
he
very
thinks
wise. He's
that.
very wise.
He is very wise. Um, yeah, so by day, I am assistant to a financial advisor, and in my free time, I love history, and so I started writing novels, and I have two books that have been published, and one is called Corrado, which is about Catherine Carey, and the other one is The Raven's Widow, which is about Jane Boleyn. And I like to write about kind of the lesser known figures or maybe misunderstood figures of the court. I think when I find somebody who I think has been unfairly judged and I kind of see that as a challenge. I like to go out there and find the real truth and see what happened. And sometimes, as is the case with Jane Boleyn, I sort of fall in love with them, and I feel like their story needs to be out there. So
I think
those are
that's one
my
thing
books.
you see a lot, or we all see a lot, is people saying, oh, she was like, shrew is a word I see a lot for Jane Russell. She was like a spiteful shrew, and she always hated her husband. And although interestingly, that's quite often accompanied by descriptions of George being a really like womanizing, nasty,
Mm-hmm.
conniving, bad husband, and and on all these things. So I kind of think, well, if he is that awful, then I can kind of understand her being like really fed up. But that is definitely, there are certain things you see perpetuated that come up over and over again about lots of
Right.
things, not just Jane, but that seems to be the really, really common one, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
tell us why that's wrong.
Well, for so many reasons. I'm actually I'm working on a piece for Natalie of On the Tudor Trail, because for May she's doing Anne Boleyn month.
Lynn, yes.
And so I'm kind of working on a piece right now that talks about propaganda. um, you know, fake news is kind of a watchword nowadays, and we think that it's a modern concept, but it really
Mm.
isn't. And the 16th century had their own fair amount of fake news, and a lot of the sources that have been quoted about Jane have been propaganda pieces, for one reason or another. And so the authors and their agenda are really sort of suspect, because when you go back and you look at the more neutral sources, and contemporary. See, a lot of the things that we have about Jane aren't contemporary to the period. They were all written like long after she was dead. And, you know, her part in Catherine Howard's fall really colored people's perceptions of her. You know, I hear all the time, well, it was karma. Well, you know, even if she did do the things that people accuse her of, and based on the evidence, I don't believe that she did. But even if she had, like, that's still so, it's so heartless, I think, to say, well, it's karma, it's karmic retribution, because no. I mean, that's just
Don't
not,
people just don't deserve that, do they? They
they
just
don't. They
and
don't.
it
Yeah.
it was we don't know why she supported or supported is not quite the right word, but she did what she did for Catherine and Culpeper.
Yeah.
But I just kind of feel like she didn't really have a choice.
Right.
If we
Right.
said to you, well, you know, you're one of my ladies, and therefore you kind of do what I say. And the thing is,
Exactly.
it's like anything, once it's happened once, you're just on a rolling stone, aren't you?
Right.
And it probably would have been quite clear to her that if Catherine went down, she would go with her.
Yeah.
So then she's going to try and hide it, isn't she? However, whatever she
Right.
has or hasn't done, there is no benefit to her to not keep it quiet.
Right.
So I think
Exactly.
she was kind of just caught, as the saying goes, between a rock and a hard place. And
And, you know, by all accounts, Henry was just like head over heels in love with Catherine, head over heels. And so, how, you know, even if Jane wanted to say something or wanted to tell somebody, who, you
yeah,
know, who would she tell? Because if, you know, if Henry did not want to believe those charges, then she would be accused of slander
mm,
against the queen, and that brought its own punishment. So she really was in just kind of an impossible position. And I think that, you know, historians have been too quick to say, I mean, it makes for a good soap opera, doesn't it? Oh, she's just this terrible, horrid shrew who, you know, like, everybody needs a villain.
yeah,
And it's been so easy to cast her as this villain because, you know, people are more likely to feel sorry for Catherine than they were to feel sorry for Jane. Um, and really, Jane, I think, was in the worst position because she couldn't say no.
mm,
Whatever the queen asked her to do,
yeah,
she couldn't say no to it. Where, and I think that Catherine had the power in that relationship.
mm,
And for whatever reason she chose to do what she did, you know, I think that Catherine deserves a lot of empathy too, because, you know, she was put in a really bad situation as well. But she had the power in that sort of dynamic.
mm,
And so the decisions that she made really, you know, affected another person,
yeah.
affected several other people. So but that's what I think, you know, a lot of what happened colored, you know, people's perception of Jane, later writers, and they had agendas to push. And so I think that that's why, you know,
I
Jane
thought as
deserved.
well, she didn't, you know, after what happened with Anne and George and everything. So she, you know, she to say she didn't suffer for it, she did, but you know what I mean. They could have just banished her,
Right.
said, you know, you're associated with them, guilt by association, and just left her to rot in a corner. So I suppose at least she still got a place at court and, you know, all those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
But she was never, a lot of people who were widowed for whatever reason would marry again, but she still had that, she was sort of tainted by the fact that she was George's wife,
Yeah.
and there was nobody there to try and set her up another good marriage, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't feel
Well,
father was
her
necessarily the
her
most.
father could have, but, you know, I think it also, she wore, I mean, she dressed in mourning, you know, for the rest of her life. And so I think that that also kind of, you know, maybe she didn't want to get remarried.
It is a trauma, though, what happened to her, to
Yeah.
think about it like that. Whether, even if she had been pleased to see the back of him, that sort of experience changes you.
Right.
Then she would have had that on her conscience, because it wouldn't have just been her husband that she took down. It was everybody else that went with him. And that
Yeah.
wouldn't have been her. I mean, I don't think she did do that, but even if she had have done that, that wouldn't have been
Yeah.
her intention, wouldn't it? So that all very much
Right.
weighs on you permanently. That's not,
Right.
unless you're a psychopath with no emotions, that sort of thing weighs you down. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a few of those around as well in the Tudor
Yeah.
world, but that's
Well, she's kind of often accused of being a psychopath, but I just don't. I just the picture that emerges of her, you know, in the sources that are reliable, it's just is not. I don't think is a very accurate way to describe her.
it is as well. It's a bit like Mary Boleyn. There's so many gaps. There's much more opportunity to fill the gaps,
Right.
and then it becomes really easy to just go, well, that probably happened, and I'll say that happened, and and there's much more scope for people to kind of invent stuff, or
Yeah.
as a novelist too, you only know so much, so you have to put that in. But we were actually, for everybody who's watching this, we were actually on for about 3/4 of an hour before we even started filming this. I wasn't going to mention that, was I? But this is one of the anyone who knows this would guess that anyway. But that's true. As novelists, you have a responsibility to still research, and then when you have to look at what we don't know, to sort of fill those gaps responsibly, really.
Yeah.
And the more gaps there are, as I said, the more scope there is to have different things to fill them. But then it's how much people have taken the little bits they do know and kind of run away with that. And if you're going to say,
Right.
well, look, I wrote about Jane as somebody who was really angry or really bitter towards Henry, so she wanted to get back at him when she knew Catherine's situation, give her the opportunity. You then kind of need to say, well, look, this is just where I took the story.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
and you can put that in the notes at the back as well, but then everyone can be guilty of not reading the notes.
Right.
I've hands up. I've done that before. So yeah. But so I'm going to tie these two things together now. So tell us about what you're writing at the moment.
So I'm writing a novel that is told from two perspectives, and one perspective is Marjorie Horseman, who was, she served both Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. And if you've read The Raven's Widow, you know she was a bit sort of unpleasant. My characterization of her was she was just kind of, snotty. and
Matronly.
I kind of felt like maybe I gave her short shrift. And that's what kind of happens. That's kind of how I ended up writing about Jane Boleyn, because even though I portrayed her as a lot more in a much more compassionate manner in Corrado than really had been much before, I still felt like I wasn't really giving her the benefit of the doubt. And so that's part of why I ended up writing about her for the second book, because, I wanted to go back and kind of do her justice. And so that is the same history repeating itself in this third book of that. As I was going back and reading my novel after it had been published, I thought, I really wasn't very nice to Marjorie. So let's go back and kind of find out, why she did, because she did at one point give some evidence against Anne. We don't know what she said, but we do know that she did say something, because when Anne's vice chamberlain went back to talk to Marjorie, she avoided him. So, and he says there's a letter that he wrote to Cromwell saying, I'm trying to talk to Marjorie, get more information out of her, but she's really sort of avoiding me because, she's close to Anne. And so I kind of I knew she said something, but what did she say?
Yeah.
And why did she change her mind? And so I really kind of wanted to explore that. And at the same time, I was really attracted to Jane Seymour because, she's so often either portrayed as one of two archetypes. Like she's either this really cold and calculating, woman who walked through another woman's blood, to become queen, or she's portrayed as just this really simple, dull sort of idiot. So what was she really? Because nobody's ever, life just isn't black and white like that. Everybody, there's shades of gray. And so I kind of wanted to explore her perspective and how it must feel to marry somebody who had just murdered their wife. That would be really hard. Whether, you wanted to marry that person or not, I think it would be really shocking, and the world was shocked by Anne's execution. I don't think anybody truly believed that she would die. I think people just thought she would sort of be banished like Catherine of Aragon was. And, there was a lot of shock when it happened. And, Jane might have set out from the beginning of trying to replace Anne. She may very well have done that. But I think that once that, that sword fell and reality sort of hit, it was a very scary place to be. Henry had no qualms murdering somebody who, he broke apart the church to marry. I mean, he was so passionate. And I do believe that he loved Anne. I do believe that. And he was certainly obsessed with her. But I do think that he did the things that he did because he just wanted her. And he and if you could watching that happen. And then what was that?
Because he was king and he should
right
have wanted.
Right.
And that was very much the general consensus. He was the king, he was divine, he was, second only to God, So therefore, if he wanted something, it must be correct. And everyone should move heaven and earth, or maybe just earth, to give him that, because that's what should happen. And he wasn't used to being told no either, was he?
No. He did not like that.
I also feel that, I know he was a very strong character and so on, and obviously he was, and what he wanted he tried to get, but I also feel that he could be a bit easily led, in the sense that if someone told him what he wanted to hear, that was enough.
Right.
And so-and-so says that, and they know a lot about that, and then somebody else said the same thing, and I was thinking that, so it must be right. But when you look at what he did with Catherine, and you look at what he did with Anne Boleyn, and other people, and you just sort of think, at the end of the day, the only person you can't fool is yourself.
Right.
And I wonder, in the darkest of hours and the lonely hours, he must have, as much as he wanted to push those things away, he must have thought, I did those things.
Yeah.
And there are other kings and rulers and people like that. And there was not, like you say, the world was shocked because he had just beheaded a queen, an anointed queen. She wasn't even just like, other queens, but she had actually been anointed. So that was it. And he just had her head chopped off because he didn't like her anymore. that's a very broad statement. And
but it's true.
yeah, when you cut down to the nitty gritty, he just cut
Yeah.
a bit. He went off her for whatever reason.
Right.
I don't know. He just wasn't very nice.
No, no.
This second broad
Yeah.
statement, he just wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it's like we were saying about Jane,
Yeah.
she was in that position, but then you look at all of them, really, not so much Catherine of Aragon and then sort of Anne, but you look at them all subsequently,
Mm-hmm.
Jane, Anne of Cleves, and the other two Catherines. Did they really have a choice?
No,
Really?
no.
Not really.
None of them did. They really didn't. No.
And
And
I
I'm sure,
Anne had just agreed to be his mistress, and
yeah.
then he'd have gone like however long later, and she'd have got maybe she would have got to marry someone she wanted to marry, maybe she wouldn't, but she'd have he'd have bumped
Yeah.
her off somewhere and she'd have been all right.
Yeah. Only if.
Yeah, there's a lot of ifs, isn't
Yes.
there, in
Yeah.
history, and certainly in Tudor history there seemed to be an abundance. So going back to Jane, we're talking about Jane, was one of the places we visited when you came over was we went to Wolf Hall, the
And
actual
it was
Wolf Hall.
amazing.
It was
Yes.
amazing. So because you sort of contacted them first, didn't you, because you were researching, I guess, around that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had always been sort of told that, all of Wolf Hall was gone, like the original that would have been there during the Tudor period. And so I kind of, did as much research as I could, but, I never really thought about actually going there because I just assumed that it would be so vastly different from Jane's time that, and plus it's privately owned, so I just really didn't think that there was much of a chance of getting to see anything. And so I stumbled across a blog that I think was written by Carol McGrath. It must have been. She's another Tudor novelist. And she wrote about her visit to Wolf Hall. And I thought, oh, so you can see it? And there's stuff there? This is amazing.
I remember that article. Now you've mentioned it. I had forgotten about it, but now you mention it, I remember. Yeah.
So I think I sent her a message and asked her about it, and she told me about Friends of Wolf Hall. And so of course, I rushed over to the website and I found that you could join and you could make a contribution. And I am always, I mean, to put it in plain terms, I make money off of telling these people's lives, and so I feel that I have a responsibility to contribute to contribute in some way of, to historical sites where the people that I write about lived, or, whatever, to their memory, because I just feel like I have a responsibility to.
And their places are always really, if I contact people for whatever, for articles, whatever, they're so friendly and they're so helpful. Yeah, they really, really are.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, as soon as I saw that I could contribute, I made a donation, and, I sent them a message and just said that I was working on writing a novel about Jane, and I was really interested in learning more. And, quite honestly, I think that she just, the woman I was emailing, and I think it was Dee that I was emailing, said that when I came over in October, if I wanted to come visit, to let her know. And so I did, and we did.
Yeah, it was just, I just felt so honored to be there, and it didn't seem like something that would happen to me.
I know.
That makes sense. I was just like, I almost don't know how I've ended up here. But I didn't think that it was in existence particularly. I suppose I hadn't given it a huge amount of thought, so that's slightly misleading. But if you talk about it now or it comes up, I find more often than not, people do not realise that it's still there. They just think that it's gone. Gone.
Right.
That there is just nothing there anymore.
Right.
And as you know, only part of it is Tudor still. Bits got lost, and it's been added onto it. I think it's Victorian and Georgian. I think it was, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
and
so.
they think that some of the stone had been taken away and used over in the village and things like that. So, but this is sort of all things that they're kind of putting together. That, do you know what? This is awful. The two chaps that had been doing the research, their names have just completely escaped me. So I feel really bad about that. But
Graham,
yeah,
Graham, Bath. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but I know his first name is Graham.
what I will do is I will look it up and I will put it underneath the video when I put the video up. I'm feeling really bad now. But yeah, they've been sort of really looking at the area and the family for a really, really long time.
Right.
But it was just, you know, they let us near the trenches, which was very brave of them because I'm very accident prone. You know, you could see, couldn't you, where they've been excavating, and he was saying how, you know, you can see that this matches up to what's over here. So there was clearly a large part of building, and then we found this there was stained glass, so that might have been a chapel, and that was really still quite the early stages. So it's just incredible what they were finding. But what I also, whenever I particularly mention this, like you mentioned about it being privately owned, people don't go there and start taking the photos and having a wander around, because there are the Seymour descendants live there. They're a family and they live there, and they've had people open the back door to have a look round and trample all through their gardens with cameras. So please don't do that.
Yeah.
That's really not the way forward. But I think it's nice that it's still a family residency, and they're doing they're going to be doing a lot to sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Reinvent isn't quite the right word, but the gardens, replicate the gardens, like they've done at Kenilworth with the Elizabethan gardens. They kind of recreated. That was what I was recreated. They've recreated those. I get there in the end. It all makes sense in my head. They've recreated it, so I think that's sort of a big part of the project, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it was we were just sat in the drawing room having cake. I was like, we're actually here.
And everybody was so welcoming and lovely and warm, and you know, I think it was such a, even if we didn't see any of the cool stuff, just being able to, you know, talk to everybody, talk to, you know, Dom and Allie and Dee, and you know, and learn about them and learn about, you know, their connection to the home. And I think that was just really, it was, even if there was nothing Tudor that we got to see, that in itself I think was the highlight for me, because that was just really neat.
All of them were just so lovely and down to earth, and Tom gave us such a huge amount of information. It was just but so just I suppose for us, we read about these people and we go to places and we're just like, wow, and we're like, you're descended.
I
know. He's like, yes. Yeah, do you want to see? And I was like, this is just amazing. But you know, when it's you don't think about it, do you?
Yeah.
But like, this is amazing. Sorry, I'm keep tipping. This is amazing. And but yeah, they're so lovely. It's such a huge undertaking. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. Go to realwolfhall.com and you can find out more about Wolf Hall, and you can become a friend of Wolf Hall. And I know finances are all over the place in the world at the moment, but if you would like to and you feel that you can and it's appropriate, then they just massively appreciate anything anyone can donate. And even just taking an interest, you know, and wanting to learn, that means a lot to them as well. So it's very easy, kind of is my perspective for, this is something I've found doing the other stuff that I've done with May Global and with the Tudor Society, is the small locations have less costs. So if you think about somewhere like Tattershall, where I went a little while ago, and then somewhere like the Tower of London, there's so much less to upkeep and everything like that. But everyone goes there. It's in London. It's one of the big places. The Tower is so accessible. And they will always get people going back and people filming and selling things and writing about it. And it's these smaller locations that actually therefore really struggle, because although their outlay is much less, they get comparatively a fraction of what comes in. So for a location, especially one that isn't able to be open to any extent for people to come in, because there's excavation and because there's renovations and everything like that, it's really hard for these places to get in the you know, it's big amounts of money. It's not like, oh, you know, like £1,000 for the church roof sort of thing. It's mega money, so I think,
and manpower too, you know, bringing people in to help do those things.
Yeah, and again, the places rely an awful lot on volunteers, don't they? All historical locations. So yeah, it's a tricky one, and I kind of feel in this current situation now, places are going to be really feeling it, because although they haven't got the costs of being open and operating, they still, you know, have to make a profit, and that profit isn't coming in. And you know, repairs and renovations and all things like that. I don't know. It's a really tricky one. And
especially with a place like Wolf Hall, it's not open. Like the Tower of London, they have a revenue stream of visitors coming in, you know, and that's not the case at Wolf Hall. So they don't have that revenue that helps, you know, the upkeep and all of that stuff. So they really are dependent upon people donating and supporting in that way. So, you know, and it's just really important to keep these treasures.
And that's it. I think it's, before you get into sort of these situations and the things that we've been lucky enough to see and do, is you kind of think, oh, I'll go there or I'll go there. And you just kind of think that these places will always be there and they will be kept running, and people will always go to the nth degree to make sure that that happens. But it's a massive undertaking.
It really
and
is.
a lot of places that used to get like grants and things like that, there's less money there as well. And with Wolf Hall, the same with somewhere like Tattershall, it's kind of a bit out in the sticks. So, you know, you go to London and there's a million things. So you could go, and you could go for a week or 2 weeks, as you know, and you can fill that time 5 times over.
Yeah.
But if somewhere's a little bit out in the middle of nowhere and you don't, you know, you're not from around that, you know, you're coming to the country, you're driving on the other side of the road, and it's a bit like, because it was driving down there was more interesting on the way back than it was driving.
I think you did brilliantly.
I won't tell you what she said about that, but it was so funny. It was terrifying, but it was quite funny afterwards. It was quite funny, but yeah, very much kind of. But we got there, didn't we? And then we got there, and then we got lost when we got there. So we think we're here, but we don't know. And God come and get us, didn't he? But,
yes.
You know, if it's you have to really dedicate the time, and later on it will be much easier and much more accessible to be able for people to get there and to visit these rural locations more. But somewhere like London or Oxford or York draw people, don't they? And so that's where people go, understandably, but we really have to sort of give some considerations to these other places. Anyway, so that was our specialist day, and I feel a bit bad saying that because we kind of just dumped all the others. See you later. The best day was when the others weren't there. You know what I mean? I don't mean it nastily. That sounds awful.
Oh, I do mean it. No. Because then you don't have to hear your kids say, "I'm bored."
Bored. Yeah. I always get, is this another castle? Like, all we ever do every day is go to castles, like, and oh, all these people are dead. It's like Oscar obviously has no filter, and so he just tends to be a little bit too brutally honest about things. But yeah, it's just not his bag. But because Oscar's like my eldest, and Logan is about a year older than Oscar, isn't he? So
Yeah.
at least when they have each other,
Yeah.
they kind of just walk off and talk about Minecraft and how their parents constantly drag them around castles, and sort of empathize with each other. So, but
At least with Logan, we don't, going to castles is not like an everyday occurrence for us. Like, that's kind of a once every couple of years thing. So he still is kind of interested.
it's a novelty
Um,
value that
you
Oscar
know,
wore
it's
off about 5 years ago.
yeah. Right now it's still a novelty, but when we go again next time, he's gonna be like, "Okay, Mom, I've seen these places. I'm done."
I could see, like, in about like 8 or 10 years or something, like Logan will come over on his own and he'll be like, I am not going to these places. Me and Oscar are just gonna go and do like other stuff, and then we basically won't see them for a fortnight. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just crazy. So I was thinking about the places that we went last time. So you guys stayed overnight at Heba, and James
Yes.
Peacock, who runs the Anne Boleyn Society, was there, and Sandra Fasoli, who's written Anne's Letter from the Tower and Struck with the Dart of Love series. So they were there, and we all met up a little bit for a while, didn't we? And I was
Yes.
just trying to tame an unruly toddler, so we didn't stay. But we went to a lot of places in that couple of weeks, didn't we?
We did.
Um,
Yeah.
so apart from Walpole, and obviously you came over in 2016 for a week as well, and some of those places were the same, weren't they?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
Hampton Court and the Tower and bits and pieces like that. So from that visit when we all went together, apart from Walpole, what sticks in your mind the most?
Um, well, I think that there are two that really stick in my mind.
I know what the
The
first
first,
one.
huh?
I know what the first one is.
Well, the first is Gray's Court. Um, when I wrote Corrado, I wrote the whole book having never been to England. And so I really just sort of had to visit these places in my mind, I mean, obviously with the help of the internet and pictures and Google and, but I kind of just had to live at Gray's in my head. I could only picture whatever my imagination could come up with. And so I had wanted to go to Gray's Court when I came to visit the first time, but for one reason or another, I mean, I was just there for a couple of days. I just, because that's another one that's outside of London. And, it's pretty easy to get to if you have the time to do it. But I just wasn't able to. And when I came home, like that was my biggest regret, was that I had not gone, because Catherine is always like holds a very special place in my heart. She was the first person that I wrote about. And, I've just always felt this connection to her. And so I really, really wanted to see where she lived, walk in her footsteps, really. And so that was the very first thing, I told my husband. I was like, I don't care where else we go, but we have to go to Gray's Court. We have to go. And, I reached out to the house steward and kind of introduced myself and, asked her about coming to visit and if there was anybody there that I could speak to, about the property and kind of get more information. Because even though, I'm not currently writing about Catherine, anymore, I'm still very interested in her life. And, I don't think I will ever lose interest. I will always be pursuing, information about her. And so, she set me up with Lynn, she's a member of the Grays Court, it's like a historical society sort of. And so she connected me with Lynn, and she also connected me with the church there where the Knowles tomb is, because that was another thing that I wanted to see. And, so we got there, we arrived, and I just remember, getting off the train in Henley, which is just the most beautiful village ever. You get off and the Thames is right there, and it's just it was in the morning. And so there was like a mist hanging over the water, and there were swans. There was just like this little group of swans that were going, and that's where they have kind of the regatta, I think is what it's called in Henley. And so there were boats everywhere, and it was just so beautiful. And so we got into the taxi, and they drove us up to Gray's. And because it's a little ways away from actual Henley, about a mile or two. And I just remember like getting out of the car and seeing the house, and just like my breath was just taken away. It just was so meaningful to be there. And my husband and son were kind of like laughing at me because I was almost giddy.
Heathens.
I know.
I'll have words with them when I speak to them next. That's it now.
Oh man, they are so good about this stuff though. Like, they just,
as well, to be fair.
yes, they're very tolerant. But yeah, and so we got there, we kind of walked around a little bit, and then Lynn came out of the house, and she gave us just this amazing tour. I mean, the tour lasted a couple of hours.
Wow.
Because she started, kind of at the beginning of, because Grays was mentioned in the Domesday Book, which was, when was that? Like 1050 or something like that?
Years ago, roughly.
Yeah. So she just started at the beginning, and she, talked about who had owned the house over differing years and the changes that they had made. And, she walked us through every room and just showed us everything. And, she was incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly just kind. And it was really, really lovely talking to her. And she showed me the Elizabethan fireplace. There really isn't much that still exists from Catherine's time, but her husband lived like another 30 years. So there's still quite a bit. And during that time, he did a lot of renovations for, a hopeful for Queen Elizabeth to come visit. And actually, there may be some evidence that she did make a very quick stop there, which you can read in Nicola Tallis's book on Lettice Knowles.
Yeah.
So I'm actually really, really happy for Sir Francis, because he really wanted that. But so some of those renovations, some of the things that he did are actually still there. And so you can see, there's a fireplace that was from that time period. There's a donkey wheel that is from that time period, it's just this massive, it looks like a hamster wheel. And basically, so the donkey would get into it and walk and turn the wheel, and it would draw water up out of this well. And so it's just really cool because this donkey wheel is still there, and Francis built it. Like, it was built during Francis's time. And so it was just really cool to see that. But then, in addition to the house, there's also some ruins there, because it was a much bigger, there were much more to it than what currently exists. And so it was really kind of neat to see, the medieval tower, and, there's like a wall, a brick wall that had once been a part of the manor house. And, you could see kind of like the archways and the cutouts of where like a fireplace would have been. And, it was just kind of neat to sort of imagine that. So, I think that kind of was like the highlight of my trip, because I so wanted to see it. And then of course, after we were done there, we had our appointment to go and see the monument at the church. And I was kind of under the impression that it would be a super easy walk to get from Gray's Court to the church, and it was not. It wasn't very far, but the difference between now and the 16th century is that there is a very busy road that goes, and there's not really, here in the US we have a lot of like sidewalks, but there was no sidewalk, so it was like you were walking on the shoulder of the road, sometimes in the road. And you would walk on the opposite side, so hopefully you would see the car coming before
they plow into you. Oh look, there's
saw my life flash before my eyes several times. But we got there.
The walk to Heber, but we'll save that for another time.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that was the best walk ever. But my husband and son may disagree. But we still talk about it. So anyways, we got to the church, and the lady there was just really, really sweet. And she said that usually they don't allow people behind the like grate to actually go up close to the monument, but she could tell how much it meant to me, and how much I really like treasured being able to see it. And so she was like, I'm gonna let you in. There were actually people who came in after us, like while we were still in there, and she didn't let them
not
in.
you. Not you. Yes, not you.
Yes.
It's just
so it was just really cool to get up close, and because it's very elaborate carving, and on both sides of the tomb. And so it was really neat to like get up close and see the things that are carved into it, to see the faces of their children, because they're lined up on either side, and the little baby, there's, because the Dudley, their last child, passed away shortly after birth. And so right next to Catherine on her side, there's a little marble carving of baby Dudley, and it's just so heartrending to see that. And it's actually really interesting because Dr. Kristen Bundeston has done research on the Knowles family. And based upon where that carving of Dudley was placed, she makes an excellent case for the theory that Dudley was actually a girl. And so, I mean, I just think it's so amazing that you can learn that just from looking at a tomb. And so, I mean, I'm totally a believer. I believe Dudley was a girl too, but it was really neat to see it, and to see how detailed, if you've seen the portrait of Catherine, you can see her neck. Well, I'll show it. You can see like her little pendant right there.
Yeah.
You can see that on her tomb. She's wearing it in the carving of her. And so, it's really, because even though, the portrait doesn't have her name on it, like we know it's her because it's the same pendant. So, yeah. So as you could tell from my gushing, it really was like the coolest thing ever.
I'm really sorry. I've just spotted the time. So what we're going to have to do is continue this another time soon, because this is obviously what's going to go up on the Facebook page. But there are people pinging me here waiting to come in and talk to you in the little after party.
Yes.
Yes. So I will pop this up when I have onto the Tudor Tracker page, when my brain decides it can work out how to do it. So it could be any time within the next 20 years. The coronavirus will be over by then and you'll already be here. But if it's okay, what we will do is come back and carry on another time. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so say goodbye to Adrienne, everybody. And I'll see you again. I'll see you again in about 4 seconds.
Okay, sounds great.
Bye.